All right. Hello. Good afternoon. Good evening. Good morning, maybe for some of you, whenever, wherever you may be watching. This is The Yard Sign, Florida's most important political podcast. Jonny Torres. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're having a great week. There's obviously no shortage of controversy, drama, and politics to talk about. So we're here. We've picked our top 3 topics for the day, but I'm sure we'll wander off into some other spaces as well.
When do we do that? I don't think we ever do that.
No, never. Of course not.
Not a thing.
And so we, as you can see right there, we've got 3 amazing topics for you, along with an amazing guest returning, who's now pretty much like a regular on the show. Hey. So I'm excited about that. We'll open up with, of course, the most important story affecting us globally, which is the war in Israel. And we'll go through Trump's legal troubles. As you know, you might see written somewhere, how screwed is Donald Trump? And then we'll wrap it up with House Speakership Round 2, as Congress now begins their search for a new speaker. It almost sounds like a spin-off of Star Wars at this point, where they're like, you know, it's like, how many chapters of this can we milk
as the Republic falls?
That's right, exactly. Well, you know, let's go ahead and get to, as I used to say, the big table, but now it's just the wide angle. Joining me, as always, Anibal David Cabrera. I know it is, but you know me. It's Anibal David Cabrera joining me, and next to, oh, hang on, let me see. I'm driving and hosting today, so there we go. Boom, look at that. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Got Anibal David Cabrera there on the right-hand side. And joining us once again, Mr. Criminologist, Dr. Leo Genco, helping to bring some legitimacy to this program.
Yes, the expert opinion.
That's right. And so let's go ahead and start off with, you know, really the biggest, again, story of the weekend, you know, and now what will probably be maybe even the rest of the year, which is this war in Israel. You know, and listening to some of my sources, you know, where I like to kind of prep for the show, what everybody seems to be talking about is, how did they not see this coming, you know, given the technology, given the resources, given how they are looked at from a global perspective as kind of being a leader in spying, in technology, in, you know, in defense, you know, in terms of intelligence gathering, you know, and they seem to have been completely blindsided by this. There's obviously some very new tactics, I guess, for lack of a better term, being used by Hamas here in this attack. I mean, Israel completely caught off guard.
So the attack was at the end of a 7-day holiday for the Israelis and Jewish people, their festivals, people with their families. It was a big thing, even to the point to where with the way the religious holidays are viewed there's really no communication, no cell phones or nothing during that time. So attack started about 6:30 in the morning on October 7th. They are now counting, as the last 3 days, almost 7,000 rockets were fired into the country from Gaza. And with that barrage of rockets coming in, which is happening almost every single weekend. So I think that's where the complacency occurs, when this is a constant thing happening, that it's weird to say that rockets are being shot into your country. And because of the Iron Dome is able to handle that kind of incoming fire, but it was completely overwhelmed. And there's videos of the terrorist group Hamas attacking from, like, blowing up the checkpoints of the gates to get into from Gaza into Israel. Well, and apparently boat ships flying or being guided outside of Gaza from the ports, and also an air attack of, I guess, hang gliders.
Hang gliders is what I keep hearing. Yeah,
and I've seen the video. It's those it's electronic hang gliders that you can have like a buggy attached to it, and they are showing them opening fire in cities, dropping Molotov cocktails on tanks. It was quite. It's a fascinating situation, but I do agree with you. It's a complete collapse of what we thought was one of the largest spying networks within Gaza and Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and it shows that there's something wrong when it comes to them.
And the details are horrendous. And obviously, this was incredibly well planned. I mean, some people were saying that maybe this was even years in the making. But on top of things like the hang gliders, you also had there were checkpoints where Hamas members were dressed up as Israeli officers, and they were creating traffic checkpoints. And when they'd hit like a certain quantity of vehicles waiting and people waiting and this and that, they would just open fire on them. The tactics that are being used again are very different from, I think, anything we've seen, certainly in recent history.
As of Monday midday, over 900 people, 900 Israelis have claimed to have been killed. Yeah. They're almost at 3,000 injured, and of the 900, 11 Americans have been confirmed to be killed.
Well, and I did hear that on the Palestinian side, where again Israel has now begun their attacks and everything. I mean, they've already taken out Palestinians in the numbers of the hundreds, taking out mosques, apartment buildings, things like that. I mean, again, it's such a small piece of territory, that I'm sure they're trying to be as accurate as possible in terms of, not taking any innocent lives. But then again, I could imagine that in this moment of despair and surprise and all the emotions that they must be going through, I think probably a lot of that type of typical, restraint, has probably gone out the window.
It's just a hard thing to swallow, especially with the issue with Ukraine and Russia that's somehow still going on. It just puts a new wrench in the machine of how do we as the United States play this globally in terms of politics. Do we start sending support now to Israel and Ukraine? Like, Congress is going to have to start making decisions.
I think there's already a recurring aid package to Israel that comes through every year already that doesn't have to get approval. So that's where they're getting around that. So they were talking about how, because of the speakership situation, that there wouldn't be any time to actually send aid to Israel because of what's happening. However, the counter argument from the Pentagon is that there's already a recurring approval.
But this is where I start to get frustrated, right? Because we've been talking about, our involvement in the Ukraine, and in particular, Anibal and I have different positions on this. We find ourselves now where even just last week, a report came out where we are running low in terms of our own resources. And if there were a need for us to defend ourselves or go into an engagement, lo and behold, now we find ourselves in a situation where one of our closest allies, if not our closest ally, is now at war. And caught off guard. They're certainly going to need our assistance, be it financial, be it in terms of resources. And some are apparently already talking about whether or not Iran was involved, and if Iran was involved, that the U.S. maybe should or could go to war with Iran.
This leads into a larger conversation of what is going on in the minds of Hamas to make this attack occur currently. After the Accords,
not the
Abraham. After the Abraham Accords and the fact that they were trying to figure out a way to move past the Palestinian situation inside the Middle East, I think what a lot of individuals in Palestine in the Hamas organization were trying to figure out a way to get back into get back their position into those negotiations, because they did not want Israel and Saudi Arabia and Israel and other Middle East countries to have normalized relations, because then that causes a bigger problem, existential threat really to the Palestinian cause. So I understand the concept of where they're coming from, that this now puts a huge wrench in the fact that I don't think there is going to be any kind of peace agreement with some Middle East countries towards Israel, because now Israel has to show some form of strength to be able to put down this. But to go back onto your original point, the conflict in Eastern Europe is completely different than than what we're now seeing as a hot war
in terms of
into the Middle East, because at the moment you have Israel now trying to figure out how do you take what's it called, a needle out of a haystack, because that's what Gaza Strip is. It's so dense. It's 2-point-something million people packed in such a densely population. It's like you trying to do airstrikes into the middle of downtown Tokyo. It's almost impossible.
Well, that's the thing. Palestine, though, has always kind of used Hamas as an alibi in the sense that, hey, they're a terrorist organization. They have nothing to do with us. And, these talks, the Abraham Accord and all that has been going on. Well, again, they can easily say, hey, that wasn't us. That's Hamas. You know what I mean? We didn't mean for this to happen, or we had no involvement in all of this. But again, I think it's almost inevitable at this point that, they're going to call for resources, and they may call for us to get engaged in some way.
I don't think Israel is going to call the United States to get involved militarily in regards to the Gaza situation. I highly doubt that.
Not
because
militarily.
There's no need.
Right.
The Israelis have a very large, very resource heavy military that I don't think they're going to have the need for us. Maybe we might do care packages, and I know that we just moved the fleet closer there, so we'll be dealing with like air superiority.
But that's the thing. So if they do find, because obviously one of the big talking points that came out almost immediately as soon as the attack happened was that President Biden, which actually went widely kind of unreported or under the radar, gave Iran $6 billion for 5 American hostages. Okay, now obviously $6 billion, you don't just, turn that around overnight and buy tons of weapons and put out an attack of this scale.
The problem is,
but hold on, my question or my point is that if Iran is found to be guilty of having been involved, at that point, does the U.S. get involved militarily?
So when it comes to the bank, and I apologize, when it comes to that bank account, it's still in control of the bankers. And it hasn't been released. Actually, the money is still in the account. Money hasn't been spent because Iran has to only use it for humanitarian usage. So that money is still in the account.
They'll find a way to launder
and
that.
they will, but the money hasn't been used for anything yet because the money is still in the account. Right. So we have to kind of take that kind of off the board and say that's not the issue right now. The issue right now is to see if, and Hamas has already said that Iran helped them with this. So that is already a larger conversation that needs to be talked out. Like, what is the punishment for Iran, which Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar are trying to figure out a way to become friendly with Israel, with Iran throwing a wrench in there. Like that, if that becomes more of a ploy, this whole thing is going to blow up. That now countries are fighting amongst themselves because of the interactions.
No, I agree. One of the problems is, and I would agree that we have a resource issue though, of how do we help? I remember the big controversy about a few years ago, where Congress was going to aid in replenishing the Iron Dome. And of course, you had people on the other side of the aisle saying, no, don't. And it was controversial, not large, but with happening in Ukraine and then Israel using its Iron Dome again. I do see how we are going to be stressed on resources in terms of just geopolitical relationships and war.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't know how to see it any other way.
Well, what I'm also kind of watching is how does now not only our political system, which, we'll talk about Cory Booker in a second. And again, some of the others in Congress, that now have to really kind of walk a fine line on this issue, but also like corporate America has gotten very political. I was surprised the Miami Heat put out a statement in support of Israel immediately.
Why on earth would Miami Heat doing?
Well, it's Miami. I mean, Jewish population, Israel. I mean, and look, it's not the stereotype, but it is. I mean, you still have a large Jewish population in South Florida, I'm not sure, but I believe Mickey Aronson, who owns the team, is
Jewish.
I believe so.
Yes.
And so for them, that's a no-brainer, right? But again, looking at like a Ben and Jerry's, who actually, was one of the companies that I believe came out at one point and said that they weren't going to do, work with any vendors or anything that had ties to Israel and that sort of thing, But famously, we have the Squad with AOC and Ilhan Omar, who have publicly supported Palestine in Congress. It's like, now how's that going to play out, right? And what is that position going to look like in the face of this attack?
Yeah, we're still 72 hours out of this attack. It's going to be a little bit of time for everyone to get their bearings and what's going to happen and how that support's going to fall through.
I'm sure it's going to be something along the lines of, well, they've been fighting this like colonialist mentality of Israel for a while. Like they will find a way to look at Israel and point the finger at them.
Well, they've been using the words apartheid for the longest time to describe what the Israelis are doing to.
And I've been hearing some of the liberal hosts out there kind of using that term.
Watching today's shows, where for a fact they are super liberal and they're super against Israel.
And the talking points went out.
But they gotta run. They gotta walk that line because they have to be going back and forth.
Sure.
And you even saw it on the Hill and to a little bit on breaking points as well. That. They understand this is a horrendous thing. Hamas is a terrorist group, but at the same time, they're like, yeah, but Israel has been running like Palestine as like an apartheid state, which I kind of don't disagree with. However, there is a situation where you have to be able to have the rights to secure your communities and secure your cities against a people that would rather see your entire civilization destroyed. Like I remember listening to the translated versions of Palestinian rallies. It's like death to Israel, death to Jews, death to the USA.
Right.
And you're like, what did we like? Why are we automatically in there? And I remember an answer on 60 Minutes back in the 90s was like, we won't be happy until they're driven into the sea. And you're like, how do you negotiate with that? Like, how on earth do you negotiate with that?
Well, the other thing is that. You mentioned actually which I didn't know, like apparently I guess Cory Booker happened to be in Israel, and this music festival is actually celebrating the 50th anniversary of, I think they called it like the Yom Kippur attacks or something like that.
This was in celebration of the Yom Kippur?
No, the Yom Kippur attacks. It was another similar.
1973 attack with Syria and Egypt. But I don't think that's.
But that was the music festival, I believe, was in celebration of that 50th anniversary, or in remembrance, or however you want to put it.
I know the music festival was at the end of the. I can't even say the words of what the holiday was ending, because Yom Kippur was like 2 weeks ago. It wasn't. This is like very close to the 50th anniversary, yes, of the Yom Kippur War. But I think it was more or less for the celebration of the holiday, not in celebration of the Yom Kippur War. The war was at the end of Yom Kippur,
right?
And this is not the end of Yom Kippur. This is,
I believe, at least from what I understood, that was kind of the theme behind the music festival.
Yeah. So apparently Cory Booker was jogging outside and had to take cover in a hotel stairway.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of bizarre, all in itself.
Yeah, it is. I don't really follow him that much, but I'm curious of why he was there. He probably was there for a political reason, but it was strange.
A diplomacy visit or something. But that's really kind of bizarre that he would find himself in that kind of a situation.
Well, it's already a weird concept. Like I remember talking to my nephew about this because we watched the news and we're watching people like take cover during the air raids, and it's a foreign concept for many Americans because they don't understand that. If you're from the Midwest or Florida, you know what a tornado warning sounds like, and other parts of the country you have these warnings. But like who is ducking for cover from a rocket attack? It just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, it's like no. I mean, I remember
this isn't Detroit. We don't have these situations.
I remember watching Anthony Bourdain, and he was in Israel, and was it Israel? Anyways, the wherever he happened to be in that moment fell into some kind of an attack, the military kind of a situation, and but. He was saying how he was just blown away by the people who live there were just kind of going on about their day, whereas as American, as tourists, you're sitting there, you're like, oh my God, what's going on? And you're seeing all these kind of rockets and gunfire and all this stuff kind of go off. And, and everybody else is acting like it's just another Tuesday. And it's true. I mean, living there, I mean, you must get accustomed to it. You must, just feel like, it's just like any other day, and you just hope that today's not your day, to kind of fall into that kind of a situation.
So real quick, the Nova Music Festival is a conclusion of the Jewish festival, Sukkot, Sukkot, which is a holiday to come together with family and friends to just be together. That's what the music festival was for. It wasn't for the in celebration of the Yom Kippur War.
Got it. Okay. So I mean, again, there's a lot that's still kind of evolving, in this situation, but unfortunately, I mean, again, and this is where, leading into our next topic, I mean, it only strengthens, Trump's candidacy, or really the candidacy of a Republican candidate, just to kind of generalize it, because now here's going to be another notch under Biden that people are going to be watching and scrutinizing and seeing how he's going to handle this.
Even with inside, and this is where I think Biden is going to be 100% for Israel. That's not a negotiated point when it comes to him. The point is people in his party are not. And that's what's going to piss people off, because you're going to have those voices that say they don't want to support, they're anti blah, blah, blah. You don't hear that at all with the Republicans. Not every one of the Republicans are going to be lockstep when it comes to supporting Israel. But you are not going to have that on the Democrat side, and that infuriates people, because then that makes them look like a divided party.
Well, it's also going to reflect poorly on Biden in terms of reflect poorly. It's just going to I don't know if you can worsen his image with war, but like, let's see, you have the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the horrible initiation into the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and his response to this is just going to have that black spot grow. So it's like, well, I don't know how else he can do something worse.
Because like, if you really think about it, if I don't, and this is just my hubris, I don't think if Trump was in office, we would have an issue in Ukraine.
No.
I don't think there would have been a war, because I think Trump would have got on a plane, went to Kyiv, and been like, "What, you're gonna shoot an American president down? Please do that."
Right.
And then there would have been negotiations in Geneva, and like the thing would have calmed down.
Well, and again, there obviously is some sort of understanding. There's some sort of chemistry there, to make it a little cringy between Putin and Trump.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But you had the same thing with that he was kind of chummy with the Ayatollah, and he was kind of chummy with the Chinese. And it's not that he was being that just because he wants to be, but because you're doing internet. Those people are crazy, and they only listen to other crazy, strong leaders. So do you really think Putin's going to listen to Macron? No. He's going to make jokes the whole time that you've been effing your teacher since you were in grade school. Like that's what he's going to say.
Right.
But you can't have a Macron try to push back against a Putin. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
A Trump can push back against Putin, because Trump would be the only one that would just like, give me a plane,
he's
let me
going
go
to make the case that, hey, at least during my administration, Putin kind of stayed put. Didn't
everyone stayed put.
Kim Jong, same thing. You know, I mean, famously, again, people thought he was crazy for meeting with him with no conditions. Without any conditions. Which a lot of people criticized him for. But guess what? He calmed down, and there weren't any kind of missile tests, and there weren't any kind of escalation tactics and that sort of thing. So again, it's as Bud Light used to say, it's only crazy if it doesn't work. I mean, but he proved his thing was always about doing things differently, and obviously whatever he did worked.
Yeah,
at least in that regard.
Now the Israeli-Hamas situation, I think it was going to happen no matter what, because it's always been
But even that, he was the one that started the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, because you have to start from somewhere. Never, because then they're like, what, you're going to allow the Palestinians to go back on land that they think they own when it's already been colonized, or the two-state solution which has been offered since the 70s in some form or way, and the Palestinians always reject the position.
Right.
So again, it can't be done, but it gets to become, it's almost impossible for almost 1,000 Israelis dead, it's almost going to be impossible to figure out a way for the Israelis to get back, because people have been saying this might be a way to divide the Benjamin Netanyahu's government. I think this solidifies the government, solidifies people arguing about what's happening to figure out a way to stabilize the country. Because especially like here in the States, you punch us in the face, the whole family grounds up together, even though we have our own internal problems. We're going to rally and we're going to push back. I think the same thing's going to happen with the Israelis.
Well, and the thing is again, one of the things that I was going to say in terms of the criticism that's been there about Israel and how tight and a leash really they have kept on the Gaza Strip in terms of who comes and goes, and and all the security and intelligence they've had to leverage to at least prevent something like this happening up until now. I mean, it's like if you have a dog that is going to bite you, I mean, you're going to keep him as on tight a leash as possible.
Oh, and I get so upset with the argument that they've been caging them. Really? Because evidently they keep on getting material to make rockets.
Right.
And they've been shooting rockets for the last few years into Israel. So instead of using rockets, why don't you do something to add more hospitals or do more food for kids or desalination plants? No, we know exactly where your priorities are as Hamas, who's running Gaza. It's to cause war, death, and destruction. When you have the bodies of festival goers in the back of trucks driving through the Gaza, and these children and people are celebrating that, where can you go from there?
What's crazy is also the number of kidnappings that are happening.
Over 100.
It's insane. I mean, and to even again, because of the technology that we have now to witness some of those things. I mean, to witness women literally being grabbed and thrown into the back of a Jeep, or into a car and that sort of thing, and these guys again walking around with AKs and ARs and whatever, and I mean this first initial attack, apparently all of the victims that they found were basically all piled up. They said it was over 200 bodies just piled up. 260
bodies from the festival.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's unfortunate. And it's going to be, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because, globally, I think the Ukraine situation already has kind of put, certainly NATO, but
has brought conflict.
But it's stretched the resources, right?
I don't think it's stretched the resources. I think what's happened again.
Well, yeah, sure. It's stretched our resources.
Ukraine to Russia is a completely different conversation than Israel to Gaza.
Yeah, but you're still pulling from the same pot in terms of military resources, financial resources.
Israel's not asking us for tanks.
Not yet.
No, they're not going to.
But again, if they...
because Gaza is not the same size.
The idea is already being floated that if Iran was involved, then the United States should take military action against Iran.
The United States is not going to cause a international conflict where now oil is a whole nother conversation when it comes to sparking a new fight inside the Middle East. I highly doubt Joe Biden is going to pull that trigger.
I don't know.
Don't look at me. I just don't trust Joe Biden at this point.
And we've talked. It's not Joe Biden. It's the people around Joe Biden.
Yeah, no, he's not making any of those decisions.
The decision, I think, is just they're going to make a decision.
Exactly.
It's going to fall flat on its face, just like every other decision with every other geopolitical conflict that has happened during his term. And I just want to know what it's going to be.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching The Yard Sign, the most important podcast in Florida politics. Dr. Leo Genco joining us as our guest today, Anibal David Cabrera, and yours truly, Jonny Torres. Thank you for watching, listening, whenever, wherever you may be doing so. I was so rusty in our last show that I didn't even, I never promoted, where to get the show, how to find it, any of that stuff.
We took a summer hiatus.
Yeah, I know.
Between
so
election
Facebook,
cycles.
YouTube, you can find all of our episodes. YouTube, obviously, the easier option there. We're also on Rumble. If you're a Rumble fan, you can find our episodes archived on Rumble. And then if you like podcasts, whether it's your Alexa device or Apple device or Samsung device, any of your favorite podcast platforms is also carrying this show. Just search for The Yard Sign. one of the main reasons I wanted to get Dr. Genco in today was to cover our next topic and really maybe get somewhat more of a legal perspective on what is happening with Donald Trump. And, obviously there's a lot of pieces to this, whether we're talking about, what's happening in Georgia or whether what's happening in New York. And those are two very different cases. But to me, the biggest concern I have is that there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Now, we already know that come election day, I believe it's going to be the same day, as one of the hearings or one of them.
One is going to be close to, I think, the primary elections, right?
Okay.
Mr. Internet?
It's happening a week before the first or second primary that's occurring.
Yep.
Now we're also starting to hear that all of Trump's PACs are broke, the campaign's broke. Now I haven't validated that, but again, he's got to be bleeding money because we know he's been using money from the campaign to pay his legal bills. But my biggest concern is again, if somehow he's found guilty, whether it be in Georgia, whether it be in New York, what kind of position does that put us in for the election? Obviously, I think the fallout from him being found guilty is a whole nother topic, in terms of the possibilities of how his supporters would react, to something like that. I don't expect, obviously I would expect protests, but I wouldn't expect anything kind of too crazy in that respect. But let's kind of, again, start kind of one bite at a time. So
that's what you have to do with this pie.
Yeah. So in New York, the biggest thing we know is that apparently he misstated the value of his properties and his assets and to gain larger loans from lending institutions, and then to sell some of those properties and that sort of thing, or when it came time to paying the taxes on a lot of those properties and assets, that he actually claimed them to have a lower value than that of which he retained the loans for. At least that's kind of my basic understanding of it. I mean, what are you kind of gathering from everything you've seen as far as the case in New York?
So I agree with you. The details are murky. There's... Of course, Trump's party is saying one thing, the prosecutor is saying another. The biggest issue here, though, is it's not a criminal case. That's where I think that's where the media gets it wrong.
Okay.
Showing that he criminally did this. I'm like, if he did, it would be in criminal court. It's a civil trial. So one thing with the civil trials is you don't have to have as strong of evidence as you would a criminal trial.
The burden of proof.
The burden of proof is different. And so that's probably why they're doing it in the civil court, because the proof of him doing such action is not beyond reasonable doubt. And all that is arbitrary based on jury interpretation and all that. But if they went to a civil court, the prosecutor understands that they don't have a strong enough case to truly target criminal activity. And so they're trying to weed out in sort of the political theater of we prosecuted Trump, so we did what you asked us to, because I don't...
So they're trying to get a win where they can get it.
Yeah, but I don't know their mentality, but the people wanted a criminal trial, not a civil trial.
Well, so this is kind of how I like to kind of break it down. Is this kind of like an Al Capone situation where they can't really get him on anything criminal, so they're going to go after him on tax evasion? Which that's not what he's being accused of, but in that sense, right?
Similar, but I think Al Capone was criminalized. I'm pretty sure it went through criminal court. Doing it through civil court, again, it's like we're fulfilling our promises half-heartedly. And so it's just, I honestly, the logic that they have and the rhetoric that they're using doesn't make sense when it actually comes to fruition of how they're doing it. And that's where I'm getting confused.
So it was a federal crime that Al Capone was charged and found guilty, and he also pled guilty for tax evasion and the prohibition charges.
Right.
It's like those are, and again, there's a distinct difference. And I think where the American people are going to have it when it comes to Trump being prosecuted as in civil or in federal courts is that, well, yeah, you found him guilty, but he's still able to run for president. Like that, at the end of the day, is the mindset of the person. No
Which some are trying to use as leverage to prevent him from running for president.
Yeah, it's a big mess of messaging for the American people. Like, is he a criminal? Is he not? And if it is civil, like, why does he? So he owes more money. Why does that matter to us?
Yeah.
Like the political attention to this, I don't think is warranted. I think they're doing this either to, now some political commentators would argue, to up the hype of Trump to be elected in the primary, to be beaten by Biden in the general.
Right.
Or they truly believe this and are that delusional that what they're doing is showing the criminality of Trump. But again, it's kind of guys, it's like not a guise, but they're sort of beating around the bush for the people, saying we're doing it, but not really doing it. It's like, I don't understand. Like, it's a weird dissonance.
I get what you're saying, because I don't understand the purpose of, and we've talked about this. If you were just to stop talking about Trump, I think this would be a completely different conversation. And when it comes to what the American people keep on hearing, because now they keep on hearing his name. He keeps on making his comments. They keep on trying to gag him in the courts.
After a while, it's just a burnout, right?
Yeah.
You know?
But that's the thing. It's so like every time they're like, oh, we're gonna gag Trump, so you can't say, you're going to gag him, or you're gonna throw him in prison. Like, this is impossible.
Well, the Georgia one, I think they put restrictions on him, correct?
Of what he can and cannot say.
Yes, yeah. That one is a completely different mess.
Because in that one, I mean, they are literally talking about, election manipulation. You're talking about the delegates, that I guess they were going to try to swap out or something like that to try to flip the votes in Georgia.
That's new for me.
Or I mean, it was something to the effect of the delegates, the electors. Where and now what some people are saying, or at least what they're thinking his defense is going to be, is that because the results were in question, he had the right to then start to set up a number of electors that would be ready to go, because it's just such a short time frame. They would be ready to go in case the results were overturned. So it's not that he was going to try to manipulate the outcome or change the outcome. It's simply that they were waiting for the results, to determine whether the existing electors would stay or whether Trump's set of electors, would be the ones that would then be representing the Georgia vote.
Ooh, if that's true, that's one of the issues with the Georgia case is it's either based on hypotheticals or associations. And so all these like, oh, well, this could be his defense, it could be that. It's like, is this all just something that they're making out of thin air? Is this really what he thought? Was there any paperwork or fruition that stemmed from these thoughts? The RICO Act is a very muddy sort of piece of legislation. It was supposed to address criminal enterprises. And first off, Trump's legal team is not. So that's a new application. And it's supposed to be about racketeering. And if I'm going through my own knowledge, racketeering doesn't mean election interference.
Right.
So the application of RICO, and I think that's just because of how Georgia defines RICO compared to everyone else.
So Georgia purposely has a different interpretation because they were trying to deal with certain criminal activity that was occurring, so they would do more sweeps and everything else. I think them trying to use this as an example, fit this square into a round peg, might be where the problem is occurring, because originally they were going to do all of them at the same time as one big trial, and because two people asked to get pulled out of that for other reasons, it unraveled the entire thing. So right now, I think what's occurring is that one, the court dates have been pushed back a little bit more, and two, which is now causing the primary situation, and two, I think Trump is going to be able to pull himself out of that span of things and be able to try it on his own. And again, I think a lot of problems are going to lie on the fact that he's able to say, well, these individuals that I was paying for told me that the election was stolen, or told me that there were more votes out there, or said these things. He can easily say that and get out of this situation. But again, we're just constantly doing something, and it's going to tire the American people out.
Well, yes. Well, because the idea of the RICO Act is to find someone guilty by association, where, okay, so the idea is that they think Trump was the head who puppeteered the whole thing, which is a completely different topic of whether he's a master puppeteer or is he an idiot, because that's two messages from the other side of the aisle that conflict. But because they think he's the master head, if they get all his lower workers to confess that, yes, this was a command from him, blah, 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 they're able to prosecute Trump. Now, the problem with the RICO Act is, first off, freedom of speech and expression, even though we do have some court cases showing that it didn't violate in some areas, it's based off of simple connections. And so Trump paid for this person decided to try to act and try to change votes. Is that Trump's fault? Is it not? He hired the guy to help him with the election. Was it on the guy's own volition, or was it forced by Trump to, there's too many hypotheticals to understand these associations under the RICO Act. And at the same time, it would be easier to apply the RICO Act if it was a criminal organization.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was for. But when it's not a criminal organization, it's like you're saying that legitimate business transactions are going to be considered criminal now. I don't understand their application of it, and I'm curious to see how it will play out. I'm more concerned that because it's murky, I'm focusing more on the actual the people in court to see whether or not their biases are going to play out in the ruling of this.
Now, how much, or what does it say, I guess, about the case in New York that, I guess, basically once they'd had that initial hearing, the judge was like, yeah, I've heard enough. Okay, let's get started. He basically, kind of alluding to the fact that he heard sufficient evidence, to obviously warrant, the case going to trial.
Well, I'm okay with the case going to trial. One, it's a civil case, so it doesn't matter. And two, the argument that you're going to make that an American citizen exaggerated on his loan application when it came to every other American doing the same exact thing, you're going to tell me I can tell you what my income range from $50,000 to $100,000. What am I going to It's very easy to make him more. It's making him more relatable to a lot of Americans.
Well, I think
that's what's causing. That's the backfire that's happening right now.
Yes. Well, that's been the case. The whole time is that all of this stuff. The fact that the government is actively, as some people see, the government is actively trying to take him down, and take him out of the equation when it comes to our election. There's a lot of relatability there for some people, and to see the government being manipulated to target an individual, again, that ingratiates him with a subset of this country that I think didn't have a way to relate to him previously, but it has garnered him some sympathy in some ways.
We will see how this plays out. I'm pretty sure it's going to go to an appeals, and I don't know who is in charge of the appeals courts for Georgia. New York, I have a feeling it's going to be more. Was a Republican chosen or Democrat?
The New York one is Republican.
Okay.
The South is, I think, is also Republican, but in a different. The New York was actual Trump appointed.
Yeah. But no, you mentioned something about the judge instantly saying, I heard enough evidence, let's go to trial. One of the problems with courts is how do we balance biases? While we have the appeals process going up to the Supreme Court, we don't really have anyone auditing how judges are ruling and on what basis. Sort of like where we have the House, Senate, and all that, they try to check themselves of their biases, obviously with their own bias. But that's one of the issues that people are going to start watching is like, how's the judge going to behave? I think with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, I think it was very unprofessional for the judge to act the way he did, because I'm like, oh, that can show bias and that can be challenged. So
if that had gone another way,
yeah,
you could easily see an appeal being made and making that case towards there having been bias there.
Yes. And so what I'm concerned about is this is going to expose the court system to the people, and we're going to have less legitimacy perception from the people on the courts if these judges do not know how to bench their emotions.
Yeah.
So that is my more concern.
But does it seem like there's more of that happening? It seems to me like there's more of there's judges are getting a little too comfortable, in terms of kind of showing their cards a little bit in terms of their personal bias.
I think it depends on how judges are implemented. So the Georgia judge, I think, is a state judge because it is at state level.
Right.
And each state has their own way of getting a judge. Some states do it through an election. Some do it by appointment. Some do it where it's non-partisan, like the party's affiliations are not known. And so you have to figure out Georgia's system to figure out if this judge would be in the seat next time go around. Let's say if it was an election and not appointed, because if it's in a blue district, there's nothing there to check the judge. So what are you going to do?
Sure. I know in Florida it is a blind system when it comes to your political affiliation. You're not, and we've seen this when we have judicial candidates running for their positions, that they are very limited in what they can say. They're very, very limited in what they can do, and they cannot answer any real questions of substance, which is annoying. But at the end of the day, you kind of want that when it comes to a judge. And if you're that concerned, then you should be looking at what they've said in the past and how they've ruled in the past as well for those positions. So here you have to be a little bit more tactical when it comes to your support. And you'll also see either conservative or liberal groups flocking to one person or the other. And that's usually how you can tell how they would rule in the future.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much to everybody for watching The Yard Sign. Again, you can find the show at YouTube, any of the major podcast platforms, and we're actually live on Twitter now as well. So we've got Dr. Leo Genco joining us, Anibal David Cabrera. I also want to go ahead and get into kind of our final subject, and maybe we'll even touch on really quickly just kind of the overall standing of the elections. But Congress also kind of blew up last week. As it was really interesting because we saw that Matt Gaetz threatened initially McCarthy in saying that he was going to challenge the speakership and oust him. Some people are saying that this was obviously just kind of a stunt, fundraising, clickbait, that sort of stuff. Others are saying, oh, well, he was just holding him to account based on the agreement that was made, when he was voted in as speaker. And, what I guess, I'd always kind of been on the fence, with Matt Gaetz, it just, never really kind of rubbed me the right way. Definitely showboater, just a little too arrogant for his own good, that sort of thing. I think Trump gave him the platform, right, to kind of come out and be like a bigger figure. I mean, when you look at the reality of the district he represents, I mean, it's incredibly small. I think under normal circumstances, nobody would have any idea who Matt Gaetz was. If you look at I think it's the 1st district of Florida that he represents, and it's the Panhandle. And so, whoever still lives there that hasn't been wiped out by a hurricane, obviously very red, that part of the state is reliably Republican. But again, he doesn't have a lot of leverage in terms of influence, in terms of, corporate power, or, there's not a lot of industry there. There is, some proximity to like military operations and that sort of thing, but like, I don't get where the arrogance comes from, right? And it's such a contrast because he succeeded his father, I believe, in that seat. And his father had a very different reputation, more along the lines of like a Gus Bilirakis here locally, to kind of use a local reference. Someone who was likable, kind of really served the community, was very beloved by the community. Matt Gaetz is now kind of turned into like this troll, and like all things, it's fine. You kind of ignore it when it's on your side, but the minute he starts kind of, being the monster that eats the creator, then all of a sudden it's a problem. And that's what he's become. I think he's become a problem. And honestly, what was funny was, because like most of us, McCarthy was going around doing the media, the weekend before and saying, yeah, he might try to do this vote thing, but it's not going to work. He's not going to succeed. Meanwhile, I guess little did McCarthy know that, Gaetz was teaming up with over 200 Democrats basically to get this vote through, to now put us in a position where we now have the speakership up in limbo again.
I think McConnell did a lot of things to shoot himself in the foot.
McCarthy,
I'm sorry. Oh my God, I keep on going. McCarthy did a lot of things to shoot himself in the foot. One of them was going on television the weekend before and like started to blame Democrats for the shutdown. I think that was a stupid thing to do, especially knowing that the vote was there. So he was very arrogant when it came to that stuff. Also allowing.
Well, I don't think he ever believed that Gaetz would side with over 200 Democrats to get him
Democrats
tossed out.
Are going to do something to put chaos in the Republican Party.
Yeah, because again, for those who may not know, he only had 8 Republicans in total vote against McCarthy.
You only need 3. That's double the amount of Republicans.
And if you look at the ones that voted against McCarthy, none of them are big names.
No.
None of them are the usual suspects.
Some of the other ones, no. A lot of them have been. The fact that Gaetz is getting all of this attention is so frustrating because the speaker put an actual bill that was very conservative, that was getting cuts, that was reducing yes, you're going to get Ukraine money, but we're going to get border money, which is a whole other conversation now that Biden is adding more money to the border now, which is hilarious.
Oh, no, that's the
hypocrisy is phenomenal. However, like it was very conservative and they voted it down. And so now you're like, I'm not going to shut the government down because Republicans always get blamed for shutting the government down. We're always, for some reason or another, we're always get blamed.
The problem now is the image of the party.
Yes.
So McCarthy, he shot himself in the foot multiple times leading up to the votes. Matt Gaetz wasn't on the same page. The one thing that people are going to take away from this is the Republicans do not know how to have forethought of timing.
Well, or they can't work together.
Yes.
They obviously can't get their act together.
Well, Gaetz isn't doing this for the Republic or doing this for the nation.
He's not doing it for the party.
He's doing it for himself.
I mean, he voted against a lot of things that, again, you would normally expect him to vote for.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And then because he voted against it and he had to submit the bill so then we wouldn't shut the government down, then he gets upset that bill passed and said, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger that we're going to do another speaker call. And that is also something that shot him in the foot because he allowed for these 3 or 4 people to run the party basically the way they are, which they shouldn't. I would not be surprised if Matt Gaetz loses his next election cycle. Honestly,
the problem is again, I think he will. Think about the district though. Who in that district is going to come out and run against him?
Yeah. If Anthony Sabatini can get knocked out of his race, and he was just as bad of a fire breather and troubleshoot and someone that was causing a lot of trouble with inside the party in Florida, and he got wiped out. I think Gaetz is going to. I think enough money is going to flood into that little district, and it's going to cause a huge problem.
If he waited before, if Matt Gaetz thought this through, be like, all right, it's a conservative bill, pass it, whatever. If he waited after that passing, then do the call for speakership, like, hey, we signed it, but I didn't like how this was done. This would have a different narrative.
It would have more legitimacy.
Yeah. But again, people are going to see the Republicans unable to regulate themselves, the Democrats laughing after all this was going on.
Literally laughing.
Literally
Well,
laughing.
and at least have a plan.
Yes.
Right? Like, okay, great. You want to get rid of McCarthy. Who are you putting up? Oh, we're going to put up Donald Trump. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, you could barely get McCarthy, which is as close to a moderate as we're gonna find these days, right? Because Democrats also have to be able to vote for him.
Yep.
Okay. And you think it's some kind of fun publicity stunt to say that you're gonna put Donald Trump up for the speakership?
He did it
before.
before.
Your Fox News addicts out there, or maybe not so much these days, but those that are your Trump aficionados, of course, get all excited because they think that there's some possibility in this universe that's going to happen.
It's the weirdest, sensation to think that he's actually being serious when he says things like that. I cannot take him serious anymore when I see him in the news reports. I cannot take him serious anymore when I see him talking because I don't believe anything he says anymore.
He's a cartoon character.
He has become one.
Yes.
Especially knowing all
down to the hair.
Especially knowing all the garbage that he was a part of just a few months ago.
Well, he's still under an ethics investigation.
The fact that he's even still in Congress is the issue. And I think
him and Santos, need to go.
Oh, and that's what's going to play. And I think that's what's going to play within his district. You start talking about
which there's Republicans threatening to get rid of him.
Allegedly having inappropriate contact with underage girls in a prostitution ring is a huge deal when it comes to that part of the state that's very conservative, very American, very red.
But the thing is that it was alleged. There was no
but it's still under investigation.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
It's
still ongoing.
Oh my gosh.
That's why I think it's either the diversion tactic of him.
Same with Santos. His stuff is still kind of in process.
Wow.
And so there hasn't been any kind of a declarative conclusion to that yet.
And you really couldn't because you couldn't lose the votes because we're only 3 above. And I say this, when it comes to, because people are like, oh, it's very difficult to govern this part. Nancy Pelosi had the same numbers on her side. She could only lose 3, and they never did this to her.
Right.
Never.
Even with AOC causing a fuss, Pelosi shut that down.
Yeah. Every single time.
But that again, the and they were saying this about McCarthy even before he became speaker, is that currently this is almost entirely a new generation of Republican congressmen and women. So there is not a lot of seniority there. And that's why you don't have your McConnells and your who's the tan guy that retired, the former speaker, John, starts with a B.
I'm drawing blanks.
No, not both.
The one that would cry every single time there was like a child on the TV.
Him.
Anyhow, but
they were very powerful individuals
they knew
that could regulate.
Right. They knew how to use the system to get everybody in line, to get everybody to fall in line, and get everybody on the same page. And it's going to frustrate me. So
that's probably why McCarthy was. So I'm not going to say inept, but I don't think he understood who he was now governing.
Yeah.
Because with the new wave,
once you're speaker, how do you not leverage that to then make sure that everybody does fall in line behind you, right? That's the time to win over some of those opponents that you have on your own side of the aisle and say, hey, I know we had our differences, but hey, here's this committee assignment. Here's a co-chair or
Boehner.
A Boehner.
Boehner.
Yeah. So, that's the time to kind of coalesce, and he obviously must have just decided, hey, I'm just going to, keep the train running the way it's been running and didn't really take any time to try to coalesce the party behind him.
His issue with the fact that he allowed it to be one person to call for a new speaker, he could have been like, no, we need at least at least a majority or at least something, so that he didn't have this situation. It gave them too much power.
Well, and this is the thing, because initially you're like, okay, I don't know. I felt McCarthy was living up to the agreement. You know what I mean? He brought up the impeachment charges against Biden. He was trying to hold off in terms of passing a CR, for funding the government as much as possible, right? Like he was kind of trying to hold on to the things that he had agreed to. But I think what really sold me on the fact of how wrong Matt Gaetz was again that a lot of the people that coalesced around against McCarthy in voting him into the speakership were nowhere to be found. You know what I mean? Like your Byron Donalds, Jim Jordan,
they all fell in line. They all fell in line.
Those folks were nowhere to be found in terms of ousting him as speaker. And that tells me, okay, these guys obviously know that this is not kosher. There's something very wrong going on here.
I will say this though, because to be devil's advocate for people who did champion Matt Gaetz, because they were talking on X, formerly Twitter, that there were some things that McCarthy did that, or I should say didn't do, that was pretty weird. Like, for instance, Nancy Pelosi still keeping the speaker's office.
Which was a huge revelation.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that I was pretty disappointed in.
Yes. It's like, I wonder what McCarthy's other deals were for the Democrats that we didn't quite see. And so
you think that was part of the deal that got him into the speakership?
The fact that she got kicked out of her office immediately after means that was a line. That was a deal. Someone made that deal, and it became a situation to where she had to get removed, and that pissed off a lot of Democrats.
Why put McCarthy in that office? Because that's what happened. They kicked her out, and then they gave that office to McCarthy, even though he's out now, outgoing speaker. Yeah,
I didn't know who they gave it to.
Well, they gave it to McCarthy, which was the weirdest. Again, the kind of weird twist in that whole scenario.
I know that Patrick, the new temp, the guy that's kind of in the chair right now. Where's he from? He's from North Carolina. Made that decision immediately
because he's McCarthy's
He's spearheaded that.
Yeah. And so right now you can start to see where the dust is settling at, like what was supposed to be. I'm assuming what was supposed to happen was enough Democrats were supposed to say present and not be classified as a vote, so then it would reduce the threshold necessary to make sure that McCarthy was still allowed to be speaker. And when that did not happen, I think that, and we'll see other things that will be triggered because of it. So I'm looking forward to see where this is going to go. So the two individuals that are in the running right now are Jordan and Scalise.
Yeah.
Is that how you say his name? Yeah. So I don't have a problem. Actually, I have a problem with both of them.
Oh, interesting.
So
Scalise, I want to hear this.
Scalise has blood cancer and is dealing with that situation. I mean, yes, he survived the attack in 2017 on the baseball field.
The shooting,
took a few bullets and everything else. But then he also has issues with like a Ku Klux Klan situation where he made a speech with them. And this was like in 2002. So like it was a while ago, but like people got records.
Wasn't that long ago.
It was I was still in high
They're
school.
going to be dug up again if it happens.
And I think that's a red line that just can't be overrun.
Yeah.
And then Jordan has an issue with the doctor that was like groping the gymnast in Ohio, and that's a big deal. And so I think that might be problematic. So there's no clean cut of these two. Don't get me wrong.
That's the problem. That was the problem we had the first time.
I like Jordan.
There wasn't like a clear choice of like, oh, hey, this guy would be great for the job, and let's pick him and move
Jordan
on.
doesn't. Neither of them want the job. Jordan does not want this job. And even though I think
they say that, but
no. Jordan has said multiple times he doesn't want the job because this is not the first time he's been asked to become speaker. And I distinctly remember him always saying, "I just want to do the work, and I want to go home." When you're speaker, you got to sell your soul. And that's going to be the problem. I don't think either of them are going to want to sell their souls.
But the fact that they're running, it does go against what they're saying, though.
They're both at the position of like, yes, if you vote for me, I will run. But they both had to be dragged into this. And they're being dragged into it by Gaetz of like, oh, these are two really good guys. You're the one that caused this mess and you don't have a plan. It frustrates me so much.
All right. Well, again, I mean, the drama's going to continue. You know, we're going to see how many rounds it takes. Last time I was right. And,
you were plus something.
No, I was less than 20. I think it was. I said it was going to take less than 20 rounds.
I thought you said less. I think you said more than 10 rounds, and I was like, they got to figure it out before 10 rounds. And I lost that bet.
Funny enough, I just found the note where I'd kind of written down everybody's guesses.
Oh my gosh!
You know, in terms of when the speakership was going to be decided.
I still think Nikki Haley's going to become president.
I do like Nikki Haley. I
like Nikki Haley. This is like, but like at the end of the day, the issue before was Trump is the only one that could beat Biden. Now it's all of them that can beat Biden. These polls are insane.
But when were those polls taken? Because after this speakership issue, some people may not want a Republican president if the party is still not unified.
I think at the end of the day, this is not going to matter 6 months from now. It won't. Unless, you know what, Gates would pull another card like this in the middle of like campaign season, like in July of next year, like just like months before the election cycle goes in full blown. That would be when it's a ridiculous thing and people are not going to vote for.
Well, and to kind of wrap up the topic on that note, was this
over a year? Was
this all really a Trump orchestrated distraction? You know, was this a way, like, because Matt will do anything for Donald Trump. Okay, so was the blowing up of the speakership a kind of a
yes, I
an
think
agent of chaos?
Yes, I think
kind
Gates
of move by Gates on behalf of Donald Trump.
Gates would blow the for Trump.
The thing is, he has such a poor record with media that he just can't outpace the media with Trump.
Well, they're not going to invite him on, right?
Yeah.
He's never going to get on now.
Like that's the thing. Like if it was Trump orchestrated, I'm like, Trump would have picked someone else. That's what I'm saying.
I think Gates did this so that the distraction of this overshots the ethic violations that he's being up for.
Oh, that too.
I think it's a self-preservation situation. You're the guy that all the far right Republicans love because they hate the moderate Republican that's in the speakership right now, and I think you're going to get a moderate Republican still.
But you don't think in any ways a distraction from the primary?
No, I don't think this has anything to do with the primary. I think Gates is too small on the totem pole for this to be an issue.
I do agree with McCarthy. It's personal.
Oh, completely personal. Completely.
All right.
This is a mean girl situation.
Oh, mean girls. Yeah.
It's straight up mean girl.
It is.
With that much product in his hair, it's straight up mean girl.
Oh my gosh. All right, let's see here. So let's go ahead and wrap up today's show with my favorite little segment. What story are you watching that we didn't get to talk about today?
Oh, watching.
The story you following that we didn't touch on today. For me, like you kind of just hinted at, I think the kind of movement in the poll numbers in the primaries is really interesting to me. Obviously taking Trump out of the equation, but the fact that Nikki Haley now seems to be rising above Governor DeSantis, which disappointing personally, but certainly interesting from a political perspective.
Oh, what was it? There was something in Tennessee that I recently listened to, and I of course, this whole day has got me muddled.
Oh, Tennessee just received the headquarters from that gun lobby, or a gun group a gun manufacturer just moved to Tennessee from somewhere because
it was about the hospitals and the legislation that was passed about transgenderism and all that. I'm following that story because it's highly contested because it was ruled okay, and now the ACLU
is getting involved.
So we're going to see how that plays out in the future, because I believe there's similar cases going to pop up in other states. So I'm curious how that battle is going to end.
Well, and again, like that to me is also a small issue in some ways, but also a larger issue in terms of the stakes of the next presidency, right?
Yes.
Because whoever the next president is going to be able to kind of drive that stake into the ground one way or the other.
Yeah, they will have, I think, like, hey, this is the direction we're going to go. You can follow suit or you can fight.
I think what I've been watching, and it's because I'm a nerd, was the surprising 377,000 new jobs reports that were done on Friday, giving the absolute middle finger to the Federal Reserve, saying what you're doing is not working, and please stop doing what you're thinking you're doing, which is going to be very much an issue of now. So before it was...
Because their strategy was literally to kill the economy.
No, that's not the strategy. The strategy was to have a soft landing, create a soft landing situation, which has never happened. So
killing it softly.
Yes, it's a song.
To quote the
Fugees. And so because this now shows that, and revisions in past reports are now showing that it's a much higher, faster, bigger economies. It's becoming to the point to where we might have 1 or 2 more rate increases before we see any cuts in the rates. And people need to start getting to understand that at the moment now the hot job market is and the economy is too hot.
Do you think we'll see 10%?
No, I don't think we'll. I don't think we'll
we're
see
at
two.
eight plus.
No, we won't see double digits. I don't think that at all. I think they're gonna because they're no longer doing 50 points. They're doing 25 basis points
Yep.
now. So I can see us getting to 8.5, 8.75. I don't think we'll go over 9.
I can see 9.
It's just because that's not what's causing the market to shift.
Yeah.
And that's the problem because so many people that are currently working are
because-
looking for other jobs.
Yeah.
And that's causing the disconnect.
And then you have the housing, which is not directly affected by the Federal
Correct.
Reserve either. Because I only listened to 2 podcasts in the morning, but one of them was talking about only 90% of people can own 10% of the people can own a home right now.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? So
That's
90%
insane.
of people cannot. And so they're waiting for that market crash. But the problem is because you have big companies coming in and buying these vacant lots, it's not going to crash.
Right. Well,
Zillow-
there's people out there projecting that I think they're saying that up to 60% of the housing market could be owned by corporations.
Yes.
But that doesn't cause a crash. So
Well, no, of
No,
course
that's
not.
what I'm saying.
But
It
no,
doesn't.
but this is
And
They're
we need a
preventing. They're
crash.
preventing the crash.
But guys, this is where Zillow got into a lot of trouble and had to sell off a lot of their houses because they couldn't afford it anymore. Because the goal of these companies holding these properties is to make money either out of the rental or or selling it and everything else. They don't want to hold these properties for too long because then they cannot make as much money when it comes to the profit.
Yeah.
So if you are having difficulties finding renters for putting these properties because more inventory is coming on board, that puts pressure on those companies to sell their inventory. Now, so this is a prime example of what's happening with us in our household. I would love to go buy another house, but I'm not going to because the prices are too high.
Yeah.
And even though I get a lot of money out of my house, where am I going to move? I don't want to move more out of the city. I want to move closer into the city.
You're better off just getting the money out of your house and building it right where it is.
That's what's happening now. So you still have a construction boom occurring because people are either splitting their lots or they're building new. So you're not having that issue in construction where things are going down. If anything, it's nice and settled. Where the economic burp is going to probably occur is probably out of Asia when China officially figures it out what's happening when they have an excess of housing of over a billion people. And
I don't
that's
think
the
they can
problem.
stop what's happening. I don't think there's any way to stave off
There
with it.
is because you no longer have individuals buying third and fourth homes.
Yeah, but their population crash is
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The issue occurring now is they've overbuilt so much that now that economy is so used of construction and material and all that other stuff where when that breaks, it breaks the whole system.
Yeah.
So whereas in the United States our commercial housing, everything else, maybe 3 to 5% of the economy. There, it's 30 to 40% of the economy, and that's what they're telling us.
Yeah.
So that's why you're like, it's probably even more than that.
Sure.
And that's where the crash occurs. So that's what I'm looking at.
I do want to just give you a quick kudos on the note that you brought up, which is how developers of the mRNA
Oh yeah,
received the Nobel Prize.
That was fun to hear about.
I mean, it's almost right up there with giving Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize, before he had even entered office. So who knows what those guys were thinking?
I don't know. And all it will do is fund this research, but
I mean, it's a significant scientific development,
Yes,
obviously.
yes.
And it's gotten a bad rap because of,
because the COVID vaccines were so rushed, like it is tricky when you mess with DNA.
Yeah.
And even the creator of the mRNA vaccines even said that, you can't rush this process.
But would you say that they've implemented it properly, or has that also kind of been mishandled in terms of what it was really designed or expected to be used for?
I would say that it was implemented improperly for COVID. I believe it was, if I can recall, back when the person who started it all was discussing it, it was meant for unusual diseases that we couldn't deal with any other way. And why they chose that avenue for COVID, I have no idea, because we had no idea what COVID was about. So why would you go with an experimental vaccine for it?
I remember at the height of everything that was occurring, they were trying to map the genome of the virus to be able to figure out a way to combat the virus. And that form was the the most recent way to do that. And so they were able to parlay into that position, into that field quickly. The problem that's occurring, and again, it was an issue of, well, how long this is going to take? Well, it takes up to 8 to 10 years for these things to come through. Well, what if I give you $5 billion? Like, and that's where those first, from March all the way until the end of the summer, when they actually started doing human trials, was the we just didn't know what was happening, and I think that was the issue. We were willing to throw the money and do the research and get these people involved, shut down the government, shut down the system for at least a few months to figure out what this was.
They just didn't communicate well of what's going on, and now we're seeing the repercussions of when you rush something that is still in its infancy
and force everyone to take it. And that's where I think we're gonna not deal with this we're going to deal with this differently in the future.
I think it will be good in the future once we have more solid footing of this vaccine, but giving them the Nobel Peace Prize when they themselves weren't the ones who really solved the COVID issue.
Right. But is that kind of why they're being given it? Because of its implementation with COVID?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Which is, I mean, I'll fair on that front, but still, it's like,
I mean, wouldn't you just give a Nobel Peace Prize to like bleach? I don't understand. Like, doesn't that solve COVID?
No.
Ivermectin?
Yeah.
Or ivermectin? Okay. And before we get all
before we
thrown
get
into gulags,
I feel like there would be better options, even though it did help during COVID. There were better alternatives to give the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, I agree. I love the term long COVID. I think that's still
Long
ridiculous.
COVID, yeah.
And how people will figure out a way to not have to go back to work.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, let's see here. Oh, no, that's mine. And there we go.
There we go.
All right. So on that note, I will say again, for me, I'm watching the election, just watching this primary, and again, as we've said, I think in the previous episode, at this point, I think Trump's kind of inevitable, barring him ending up in jail, which again also seems unlikely timing wise.
I don't know. We have a long election cycle. We have a long primary cycle, and I am looking forward to all of it. Do I want a 2.0 Trump? Yes. Just because to blow the system up. I would love a Nikki Haley as vice president to then see how that works.
No, RFK is going third party.
Oh,
Yeah.
we didn't even talk about that.
I know, which we need to, but
That takes Dems. I swear to God,
no,
that takes Dems.
they're saying it's actually going to take Republicans.
It won't
Yeah.
take Republicans.
No, I heard
He's going libertarian.
It takes independents and it takes Democrats. Because people that don't want to vote for Trump were never going to vote for Trump to begin with. Now you're giving them a third option. Who does that get rid of?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's going to hurt both.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
On that note, I also want to give a quick shout out to my friend Don Scott, who is hosting with an incredible list of experts the second annual Tampa Bay Criminal Justice Summit. That's going to be an awesome event. I'll be there all day. It's from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Multiple panels throughout the day. It's very in depth. They're also going to look at it not only in terms of what can be done legislatively, to reform criminal justice, but also re-entry for a lot of former recidivism, a lot of former felons and that sort of thing who are actually also going to be on the panel. They'll have some of those individuals. Someone else that we know, Lance Wissinger, he's going to be on one of the panels. There's legislative officials that are going to be part of some of these panels.
Shout out to Lance for giving me the speaker's name.
Oh, but it'll be October 21st, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Tampa Bay Criminal Justice Summit at Tampa Prep, right there just outside of downtown, Tampa Prep High School. You want to visit horizoncommunities.org. That's horizoncommunities.org for tickets and more information. Again, the second annual Tampa Bay Criminal Justice Summit, phenomenal event being that is just blown up already in its second year. And if you love policy, or obviously if that's an issue that's important to you, definitely come out and support, because there's not a lot of people really kind of focusing on that issue. This past legislative session didn't really seem to make a lot of headway, whereas in previous there's been some kind of advancement and some reforms, and so it's one of those issues you got to keep it front of mind, and so we certainly invite everybody to come on out for that. Thank you to Dr. Leo Genco as always, Anibal David Cabrera as always. Great conversation, you guys, and we'll see you back here next Monday. Next Monday. Whatever. Oh, wrong button.